This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube with a returning guest today, none other than a fellow Canadian now making his residence in Alberta. He is a filmmaker of such films as Transmedium, Fast Movers, and USOs. The Psychic Phenomenon that I just watched last week, Volcano, UFO Mysteries, and Beyond the Spectrum. So quite a bunch of movies. How are you doing today, sir?
Good. How you doing, man? It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been about a year or so. What have you been up to the past year other than making the Psychic Phenomenon and having a kid?
Well, I've been making quite a few docs. I released two docu series. One called Dark Alliance, which is about a bit of a different story for me because I covered a scandal in the UFO community. David Wilcock, Corey Good, and a bunch of the secret space program LARPers. And I also did a docu series with Philip Mantle, the Mantle Man, the man who handles the mantle out in the UK. And yeah, Phil and I covered the Pascagoula abduction incident, and that was a good one too.
I actually
But
interviewed Calvin Parker about that. It was one of my first ever UAP interviews. Very fascinating situation.
yeah. So we featured Calvin the way that we did Pascagoula 73, which is this series. The first episode is Charlie Hickson's side of the story. It's called The Ballad of Charlie Hickson. The Ballad of Charlie Hickson's Abduction. Then the second episode is all Calvin Parker's side of the story. And we got his last known hypnosis on tape of the incident. So it's like a hypnosis session plus a reenactment of his whole abduction, and then like a bunch of historical and archival stuff. Yeah. And then third episode is this new lady and her husband, Maria and Jerry Blair, who said they were abducted on the other side of the river the same night. And the fourth episode is kind of like a mini biography on Philip Mantle and how he got involved in this story, but really kind of a backstory on him because, you know, he was a British ufologist before he met these guys. So he kind of cut his teeth chasing other stories over on, you know, in that side of the world. So that was good. And then The Psychic Phenomenon is my latest doc, just came out about a month ago.
Now, the new lady for the Calvin Parker story that was abducted on the other side of the river, I've never heard of that before. How long ago did she come out?
She came out, I believe, about 5 or 6 years ago. I gotta, you know what? You're just stumping me here, you son of a gun. Let me see. When
Well, the
did
reason I gotta ask that is because in recent years it got another surge of attention, as you're obviously well aware, because initially when it happened, it was a big deal. And then with YouTube and stuff, the story got around, and I know the Travel Network did stories on it. So obviously you must think she's kind of credible to do that, but it's strange that after all these years, someone new would come out of the
Okay.
woodwork.
Okay, I was right. It was 6 years ago. So what happened was they unveiled this historical marker for the 1973 Pascagoula abduction that was dedicated to the city of Pascagoula at Lighthouse Park on Saturday, June 22nd, 2019. The reason why I bring that up as when they revealed this marker is because Maria and Jerry Blair went, and that was the first time that what's his nuts Calvin Parker met Maria. So yeah, it was a good one that they met at that, and then the whole abduction thing was discussed after, when once Calvin got to meet them, and she was like, hey, I was taken the same night, and her hypnosis session is the third episode of the docu series.
How do you find hypnosis as a legit way of recounting alien abduction situations?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a controversial aspect of any situation that you use hypnosis, right? I think Jennifer Stein, who she actually produced the Travis Walton documentary. It's called Travis. And I featured her in this documentary because she talked about like MUFON and how abduction wasn't always accepted by MUFON. And now it's very widely accepted. But when she looks at hypnosis, which she quite correctly states in this documentary, it's really about relaxing the person, right? To me, some people, skeptics, will say, oh, it's like a false memory syndrome that these people are suffering from because they're just being given all these options to create a memory, right? But for me, people that get hypnotized are just being put in a state where they're super relaxed and they can focus on a memory that they've been trying to block because it's so traumatic, right? That's really the purpose of hypnosis. And look, there's veterans that go to war. They come back and they're suffering from PTSD. And one of these strategies to bring veterans back, so to speak, to a level that they're comfortable and they can actually receive therapy. Some treatments have been to offer MDMA, you know, the drug.
Oh, really? Isn't that ecstasy or Molly, some people call it?
I think it maybe they're given some version of that, and the reason why is because it relaxes them and like allows them to feel comfortable. They don't feel like that fight or flight instinct when they're on that, and then the therapist can like literally walk them back to where their trauma started and walk them through that trauma and discuss it and try and make them get over it, right? And I think hypnosis is, you're not taking a drug, but the therapist is trying to bring you to a level that you're comfortable, that you're relaxed, and that you're allowed to show yourself what you've been blocking or feeling super uncomfortable about.
What is your opinion on the whole abduction phenomenon? Because some people don't believe it happens, some people believe it happens, but don't believe that it can be traumatic, as some people report, as far as the, I don't know if you want to call it molestation or whatever has been reported. Other people say it happens and it's a wonderful experience. There's so many different opinions on there. What's your take?
I'd like to abduct you hog tie you, stick a apple in your mouth, and throw you in the back of my truck.
Well, that's another way of humans can do abductions as well.
I
That
know.
doesn't sound too fun.
I know. I'm just joking. I think obviously it's controversial. It always has been. People have been, making fun of the anal probes and all that stuff for decades, right? But I think that was really pitched at Whitley Strieber. He even has commented on it in some of his like interviews of the past. Like they're making fun of me and saying that I was going to be anal probed and stuff like, I don't know. But
Because he got a tear, right? He actually got like a tear in his anus,
yeah,
which caused, just as anyone could imagine, that's nothing euphoric that people talk about or
yeah,
revolutionary. That's quite uncomfortable.
it's not great. You don't want to suffer an anal tear from meeting the alien buddies, right? Not good. Not good.
Yeah. So, and then we have some people say the reason why we don't get disclosure is because of this abduction phenomenon. Are they going to say, oh, well, the flying saucers and stuff are real, but the abductions aren't? Because that's quite frightening that you could be taken from your house, have experiments done, sometimes pleasant, sometimes not. And then if you, are you returned, or sometimes maybe you're not returned and we just never hear about the people again.
Yeah, I think what's more common, the most commonly reported aspect of abduction is some kind of medical procedure. And, with Betty and Barney Hill, they discussed blood being drawn. She was one of these first people that stated that they stuck a needle in her abdomen and for purposes to maybe retrieve ovum, eggs. And you look at this case, Calvin Parker, he said that he had blood being removed from him and something else put back into his body. Maria Blair said that she felt like they were harvesting eggs from her. This is like commonly reported. And I know that there's other filmmakers that have focused on this and the abduction phenomenon and said it was, quite commonly discussed that there was like a hybrid program. And we kind of discussed that in this documentary too. Dr. David Jacobs was one of these guys that kind of he carried the torch after Bud Hopkins passed away, took over the research of abductees and, this phenomenon. And many of these abductees were talking about, meeting their hybrid children and all this stuff. I can't put my finger on, saying it's all real and it's all true. But I thought the Pascagoula incident was actually a cool one, like a case that seemed to have all these elements of truth to it. So there was like dozens of witnesses leading up to and after that night of October 11th, 1973, that had seen stuff in the sky, like Sheriff Fred Diamond, other police officers, politicians, civilians of all kinds, the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Air Force got involved, and J. Allen Hynek, James Harder, they flew out there to interview the men. And the first thing they published to the media was, we believe these men went through this traumatic experience. And Hynek alluded to that in his time during Project Blue Book, what they discussed was quite common. And Project Blue Book didn't publish anything about abduction or close encounters of the third kind. You know what I mean? That stuff came later. Um,
There's David Jacobs there, by the way, who you just mentioned. He was a professor at Temple University, so fairly credible guy.
yeah. And so what I was saying with regards to Hynek, it makes you wonder what they omitted that was going on during the Blue Book days if he said that this was something I had heard many times before.
The one thing about David Jacobs is he claims he was actually abducted hundreds of times, and they would actually reward him for cooperating because at the start he wasn't cooperating, and they would give him some type of incredible sexual pleasure feeling as a reward. And if he wasn't cooperating, they would make it quite painful for him.
This is on Wikipedia.
No, I've heard that from David Jacobs' interviews. He's done several interviews with all kinds of radio shows over the years talking about his book.
So they'd give him an orgasm or they'd give him an anal tear.
No, apparently it's some feeling like an orgasm.
Wow.
Yeah. He also said they were very fascinated with hats, that humans wore hats, and very fascinated with war. There would be all kinds of questions about hats and war, and they would like project pictures of hats and stuff to him, and he would have to talk about various it's very interesting, all of this stuff that David Jacob talks about, which I wouldn't take that seriously if he wasn't a history professor at a university in Philadelphia. That
I
guy
don't know
knows.
why they didn't abduct you, man. You're wearing the hats and you're a
I
man of
don't have a
war.
head of hair like yours.
Oh, come on, get out of here. You got you got your beard. There you go.
There you go. Well, one thing I got to ask you about today is this three-eye atlas. We've had Professor
Oh
Avi
man,
Loeb talking about it quite a bit lately,
dude,
and the latest news is there
Avi.
are some pictures of it when it passed by Mars, but apparently NASA is withholding a bunch of pictures because it's almost been 5 or 6 days now since these pictures were taken, and they're using
Uh-huh.
the government shutdown as an excuse. What do you make of all of this?
I mean, like, I think that it's just a comet, but nothing proves at this point that it's something other than a comet. It's just an anomalous comet, right? It's like a comet that is irregular, in my opinion. But I'm not the scientist, you know? Ross Coulthard, he's not the scientist. So I am not the scientist. I can't say these things. So, you know, I don't know. I'm just doing my Avi impression here.
I hope for our sake you're right about that. I honestly hope so, because we're in a lot of trouble if there's something the size of Manhattan that people are saying there's other things around it now. But I've also heard Avi Loeb himself say that it's not uncommon for comets to travel with pieces of debris. So it could be pieces of debris and not
Totally.
actual.
They create their own gravity. You know, it's like a planet has a moon, right? The moon gets pulled into orbit through its because it has its own gravity. So Jupiter is a large planet, therefore has multiple moons because it has a large amount of gravity due to its mass. Mars has two, we have one, but our moon is massive compared to the stuff that's around Mars. So, you know, but I think if there are aliens, and we've heard multiple accounts and testimony since, before Roswell, even if you're looking at like paleo abduction and all kinds of strange occurrences that happened at a time where religion just called them aliens or demons. they've been here for a long time, right? So why would they need a comet to come here? Or sorry, why would they need a massive ship traveling from deep space to come here? You know what I mean? I think it's just the wrong idea. I think a lot of people are getting distracted by it, and we need the Epstein files.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say that's unusual, other the one argument to that could be, well, it could be a different type of alien, not the ones that are here. But Craig is bringing up that Tim Burchett recently said that there could actually be as many as 5 or 6 underwater bases here. So that's exactly what I thought about. Like, if they have bases here, what is this giant comet, or is this something totally different? But you've done movies about fast movers and unidentified submerged objects. What are your thoughts on Burchett? He's actually said it twice now, once walking on the street and then once in an actual news interview environment with our friend Avi Loeb.
Yeah, I've been seeing that, and I think he's had some kind of briefings with, credible whistleblowers that have told him the details on that. It's purely speculation, though. From my side, I would say it would make sense that there's one somewhere in the Atlantic, somewhere in the Pacific side. A lot of people say that there's activity around Guam. There's a lot of activity, Lake Baikal and places near Russia, the Arctic Circle, and near Brazil in the ocean there. Again, strictly speculation, but I think it's perfectly reasonable that there could be deep underwater bases if you know that we're not going to be visiting there anytime soon. It's strategically a sound idea to set up there.
Why do you think the visitors in the Brazil area and South America tend to be a little bit more violent, and we hear in those areas reports of actual physical injuries, and in some cases injuries even leading to death?
Yeah, there's like the Colares incident. I don't know. Maybe like it's a case of, well, like if you look at North America, abductions or close encounters that have happened well into the past, right? A lot of this stuff originally was happening to like farmers. And when the authorities would go check these incidents out, um, quite famously, actually, during the swamp gas, that was a term to debunk a famous case that happened, I believe, in Michigan. And this rural area where it happened, J. Allen Hynek said it was like an optical illusion due to swamp gas on the moon. It looked like an alien craft had landed, but everybody in that region, by all accounts, saw a craft land in a field. There was no swamp gas bullshit, some explanation to just
He
debunk it
took
like that.
that back too. For anyone that doesn't know, he publicly stated, even on video in interviews after, that he regrets saying that.
Right. So my point is that it was very common for on the outskirts of cities for these types of things to happen. And if you think about it strategically, the further out you go, the more advantage you have. You're further away from militaries, possibly. You're further away from, authorities, police, all that type of thing. And also you have lesser eyes on your activity. So you go to Brazil, you're far removed from an American military response, which, everybody fears their response. And yeah, it's just maybe your advantage to take on rural populations there.
We've also heard the rumor, which my friend Tiago, who is on the Netflix documentary about Brazil, but we've heard it come from, I forget his name. What the heck is that guy's name? That the Close Encounter. Oh, Jacques Vallée. He believed that the Brazil thing could have been actually the Americans pretending to be aliens. He said that he's seen some documentation about that. Speaking of the Americans being feared, what do you think about that? He hasn't released it.
Yeah, I would love to see the documents, but obviously, you think about even Moment of Contact, which is the Virginia um, close encounter case, where a whole town of Virginia, Brazil, was kind of quarantined by the military. Multiple witnesses see UFOs in the sky. There was a crash, and then those beings. Those beings did not fit the description, in my opinion, of American military in suits or costumes, And one guy lost his life from touching one of those things. His like immune system shut down from whatever was being secreted by its skin. So um, I think it's possible. Maybe Jacques Vallée is right, but it's also possible that there is an extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence aspect to what has happened in Brazil in the past.
Yeah, that contamination factor is something a lot of people don't think of very often, but there's a good example that these things might not be out to hurt us, but either the radiation from some of these crafts have been known to cause physical damage, or in that case, there's a guy touching a being trying to help it that develops an illness and dies within a few weeks.
Yes.
So there's the poster for your Pascagoula one. What a great name
Sexy.
for a town. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sexy. The guy on the right. That's Calvin, right? He looks a lot
No.
different.
So
Okay,
Calvin lost his hair like that when he
okay.
aged, but that's actually Charlie on the right. On the left, the young man is Calvin that looks a bit like Elvis. He's got the chop. See the sideburns there, the chops. Um, he was only 19 years old when that happened, and
Oh wow.
Charlie was 41. So there was a huge age difference. And then the sexy blonde on the top was the lady that Calvin saw in the abductions. And he thought she was kind of cute and he might want to take her out for a beer sometime.
That brings us to this question.
Okay, question for either of you, fine gentlemen. Should I hold out faith that the UFO enigma will end up being smoking hot alien space babes? I mean, why not? There's got to be a bit of that. Some people say the Nordics, right? The Nordics are like hot. I'm kind of Nordic, but I'm like a short Nordic, like leprechaun Nordic. Come on, what if there's like some beautiful 7 foot tall space alien blonde that lands in your backyard one day and is like, come with me.
One thing we have in common is I did a clip of us talking about Charles Hall last time, and you were right. It is like blasphemy to his fans to question in any type of way Charles Hall. Did you happen to see the extended interview he did recently that I think showed some more holes in his claims? It was done with Jesse Michaels.
I didn't watch the interview with Jesse Michaels because I'm just kind of sick of like the same territory being covered all the time. Like, if you're gonna, I didn't know that he covered new territory. So I'm glad that he did. Good for him. He should be doing that, because just interviewing the same people that have been in the UFO community forever that tell the same story is like boring as hell to me. But if he covered a new story, that's great. Charles Hall, I think, is full of shit. And I'm not afraid to say that. I'm sorry. He can't even prove that he was serving with the Air Force. And interestingly enough, like, I've been in this community for a long time. And when I was living in Australia, I took my buddy Andrew Dennis to see Charles Hall with the New South Wales UFO. I think they have like a club or something like that. So this would have been 13 years ago. And Charles Hall and his wife come as a couple everywhere. She's kind of like his manager. And I told this story on last podcast on the left when they interviewed me. But my buddy Andy Dennis and I were like lying down on this carpet, looking up at him at the podium. He was telling his stories about hanging out with the tall whites at this Air Force base, secret base, right? And when he told this story about how they liked strawberry ice cream, they loved it, and he would watch them eat it at the mess hall. You wouldn't believe how much they love strawberry ice cream. I was just like, oh man, like, this is just so ridiculous. He wrote those books initially as science fiction. And after they started becoming popular and selling really well, he came out and said, all of those stories are not science fiction. They actually happened to me. So if he had come out initially and just said, yeah, that's all real, then I would have been like, okay, maybe. But his story is just, it's all over the place.
And they are classified as fiction. It says it right on them. So
Yeah.
the electric horse, there's some type of electric horse, range 4 Harry. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. He's been up in the craft too, and he's been traveling to these planets. But what can you tell us another sentence in his voice before we leave him?
Well, my wife, she gets mad at me sometimes because I fantasize about one of those tall whites. She used to spank me on the base.
He's the one thing I'll say about him is he's easy to fall asleep to. He's got a good voice to fall asleep to, because I used to listen to some of his stories as I was falling asleep before I realized the truth, which is these stories are just preposterous. And of course, you've done a bunch of movies about
Yeah.
underwater UFOs. Here's one. I used to live in Puerto Rico for
What?
wrestling, yeah. And I did notice there people aren't as opposed to the idea of UAPs as they are in most other places, particularly back then. Now
Yeah.
people are more open to it, but
So that documentary I basically re-released for free on my YouTube. You can go watch it now if you want. I just called it Puerto Rico's UAP. And I added some stuff to it. It's kind of like a director's cut, but essentially I made that documentary transmedium with Tim Gallaudet, the former 2-star admiral with the U.S. Navy, who's come out and said, yeah, like, UAPs are real. And I had my own experience with the classified video that got wiped from our email server, and eventually went public later. But the Go Fast UAP video. But in that, I just build up this chronological history of USO activity and a supposed submarine, commonly reported encounters with USOs, and how the Navy probably has a fast mover program which catalogs these cases and events throughout history. Mark D'Antonio's in it, Jim Goodall, Richard Dolan, and a bunch of other folks. And Andy Marcial, who's a Puerto Rican guy, I interviewed him about his Department of Homeland Security UAP video leaks to the public, which he got from this guy, Bob, who I'm friends with now, who formerly worked for Department of Homeland Security. And these files were designated authentic UAP. And in fact, in 2023, in August, when we had this small window of UAP being like kind of declassified, like they're pushing the 3-letter agencies and stuff to release their files, DHS followed suit. And you can go look at these documents for free online. That UAP, all those videos from the first Transmedium film were in there. And one of the UAP videos that I talked to Andy Andy after I'd met him and we'd finished that first interview, we were kind of hanging out. And I was like trying not to fall asleep because I had literally got off a red eye and went right into filming. This guy will remember this. I fell asleep on my buddy Tony's couch while they were like nerding out on UFOs. But he was like, hey man, like, it's a really cool video, the Aguadilla 2013 footage from Puerto Rico. And I was like, yeah, what is that? I think I've seen it. And he was like, yeah, totally is real. And it's like long footage and all kinds of anomalous stuff is happening in it, blah, blah, blah. So long story short, I stayed friends with Andy. We planned a trip to Puerto Rico. We ended up like connecting with Jorge Martin, who is like the George Knapp of UFO research out in Puerto Rico and all these events that have happened out there throughout history. And he hooked us up with the guy who leaked that 2013 Aguadilla footage that worked for CBP, which is, linked to DHS. And we got the whole backstory on how it was recorded, what happened after. And we traveled around the island, spoke to other experiencers of UFOs, and this guy who said he was in contact with like an alien, a human-looking alien named Amaron.
Very interesting. And of course, there's the poster for Tim Gallaudet's Transmedium Fast Mover and USOs. Did he tell you anything about these bases? Because he seems to be someone that if anyone would know about these underwater bases, it would be Tim.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's familiar with some locations that have activity like that. And I named a bunch of them already. But there's like Point Doom, that object, which is pretty weird, off the coast of Malibu. And there's all kinds of strange Catalina Island, strange activity in the Pacific that if you look at Google Maps, even there's this large object that looks like it's drawing an S on the sea floor and it has a dome shape to it. That apparently has been tracked by intelligence and military for a while. And it might be a giant structure that's just like maybe even mining stuff off the ocean floor. Maybe it's not that. I don't know. Maybe it's just like some kind of geological thing. But It looks pretty odd if you look at that satellite map. I saw it recently.
What's your theory on what they're doing in water? Is it just because they're out of the way there? Is it because they use water as fuel? Is there something underwater that they're getting energy from?
Yeah, I mean, you could argue all three of those reasons. Kevin Knuth, NASA scientist, said, "Look, at the bottom of an ocean, you've got all the water you need, which you can synthesize into oxygen and hydrogen, oxygen to breathe or hydrogen to create fuels of some kind. Um, and then you've got all of this uh, ocean floor that you can turn materials into other things. Like you could create maybe other craft, or you could synthesize things with, and then you're out of the way. Like you said, you're definitely out of sight and out of sound. Um, I mean, technically, the SOSUS net or certain submarines could probably hear you at certain depths, but can they go right to the ocean floor? Not a lot of them. You need a deep submersible, and usually those are one man craft.
Do you think whatever's under there with these bases has been there for a while? Or I've heard the theory, is it the people of Atlantis that had to move underwater? Or have they been there before even humans have been on Earth? What do you think it is?
Well, I think that's the biggest question, right? Like the crypto terrestrial theory that was posed by like Michael P. Masters and a couple other um, Harvard scientists recently in the past couple years. They posed the question, is a non-human intelligence existing on our planet, and have they existed, but they just stayed in places that were beyond our reach, that were, they were able to thrive. And the ocean floor could be one of those places. Deep underground could be another place, right? But I don't know. Like, we don't have that kind of proof. I think the Department of War, formerly the Department of Defense, probably has some of those answers. Um,
Hey, how does Ross Coldheart pronounce the Department of War? Somebody says you have a great Ross Coldheart impression.
Department of War, mate.
Very good. Well, then that brings us to, is there some type of an agreement? Because even people like Jim Semivan, he hasn't gone out and said it, but there's a former high up there CIA operative that he said on the record in a clip that's on this channel that he believes it would be very likely that there is some type of an agreement with some level of the government and at least one of these types of beings.
Yeah, so there's like the fabled 1952 agreement between Dwight D. Eisenhower, the president of that time, post World War II, and a non human intelligence. And it is just a rumor. Um, there's no proof. It's, if we had proof that was out there, that would be the biggest smoking gun ever, right? And that is alleged to be this treaty, right, that allows abductions of us for technology and information intelligence to help us, to help the United States have an edge over the rest of the civilizations on planet Earth. So I don't know. It would make sense that if there was a meeting between a president and a non-human intelligence, that they broker some kind of deal, because that's usually why you have a meeting. You want to discuss some kind of business and opportunity. But Is there proof? We don't have any proof.
Yeah, and I've heard Jim Semivan, speaking of him, as well as Barack Obama. Of course, Barack Obama said it in a joking way, but they both said the reason that these things are not talked about by the government is because they exercise strict control over us and they do not want us to talk about it. I mean, Barack was laughing about it, but Jim Semivan actually said the reason why they don't talk about it is because of that reason. Not he didn't say the strict control thing, but he did say they don't want us to talk about it.
Yeah, and I mean, like the other thing is that if you look at somebody like Gary Nolan, who probably doesn't want me putting any of, he doesn't want me to discuss him. All respect due, but he has said in the past, like, if an extraterrestrial race that is highly advanced is here, by all accounts, they're so highly advanced, they're just way ahead of us. And if we're trying to like figure out them or communicate with them, it would be akin to, us walking into our front yard and picking up an ant and speaking to it, right? There wouldn't be much purpose in doing that. And so why would you make a deal with an ant? Like, you could gain something, I guess, but the deal would be heavily one-sided, right? So I think what like Lou and all these other people are alluding to is that they do have the advantage and they're not gonna like, no deal would do for them, right? They can just exploit as much as they want. But then you go talk to Greer and he's like, stand on a log with me and we'll kumbaya them here.
And Lou has downplayed it more recently, but for a while there, he was alluding that something might happen in 2027. Leslie Keane has said it. Nick Pope has said he heard rumblings about 2027. Have you heard anything about this or something's going to happen around that time?
I mean, it might not even be aliens. It might be like AI, might be rogue AI, AGI. Who knows? Um, I don't like. I've spoken to some people that discussed the 2027 timeline, and I wasn't impressed by their answer. I thought that it was kind of bullshit. So, I mean, I remember 2012, we were all supposed to perish or something like that. That never happened. 20 Y2K, 2000, something was supposed to happen. Nothing really. Maybe some motherboards got screwed up. And here we are, 2 years away from another date. Oh, yeah. And 3i Atlas, like, is that supposed to crash into us? Like, there's all kinds of people that are doomers and spread misinformation because they live off of that, like, fear porn. And I think it's not a constructive way to live. But you can always push the date. A lot of these people just do. So if 2027 something doesn't happen, guess what? We'll just push the date. Maybe it'll be 2035.
Yeah, I think that religious guy too, whose name escapes me, but he's from North Carolina, that's always filming what looks like drones to me. But do you know who I'm talking about?
Just Bledsoe.
Yes, Bledsoe. Yeah, he's been pushing some 2026, April 2026 or something. But yeah.
Did you see the winged orb?
No, I did. What did you think about that Ross Coulthart video that came out the other week with all these dancing around type of glowing beings? I don't know. There's some weird stuff.
I didn't see it. Who was usually there's a guest that explains something new, right?
Yeah,
Who was
I'll
the
look
guest?
it up while you tell us about the Bledsoe thing.
Um, I really think he's a great man. I think he believes what he's seeing, and I need to see it myself and fully, experience it to rule anything out. Uh, he's got a great family that's around him that love him and support him and are on this journey with him. And we will see. We'll see if 2027 or 2026 pans out for them. You can always push the date. You can always push the date.
Yeah. Well, do you think at some point, I mean, I know there's been nuclear blasts before and nothing has been done. Do you think if we are going to have some type of war where if they have assets on Earth, it might be affected, that they would step in, or are they already, if they are in contact with the governments, saying, hey, don't do this, or we're going to be very upset?
I don't think they're stepping in. I mean, they should have stepped in for Gaza, Ukraine. I don't see any stepping in. Just because you're going to use a nuclear weapon, I mean, there's better reasons to step in. Look at our planet right now. It's fucked.
What do you think their interests are for Earth, or are they just observing us?
If they're here, then yeah, I mean, for sure, observing us would be amazing. It's like free space television. And we're obviously still very primitive. We haven't, I mean, when humanism happens, where we have this singularity take place and we're melding with technology, artificial intelligence and cybernetics and, you know, mind to internet interfaces and stuff like that. That might be where things become most advantageous and interesting to them, in my opinion, if, they're here. So we'll see.
And you're talking about that. That's really the subject of your books, Psychics and the Phenomenon. I ordered it from YouTube Movies last week. And I'll be honest, this is not the part of it that I'm really interested in. But I got through the movie and I found it interesting. And you had some people on there credible enough that I paid attention. So is that a section of it that you've always been interested in? Remote viewing, psionics, AI, and so forth?
No, I actually was not interested in like the whole remote viewing thing at first, but once I really started educating myself on it and seeing what all these other people had experienced with remote viewing and the history of it and how that kind of connects up with the non-human intelligence history. It all just kind of like came together. It all just made sense to me. And it all sort of seems to be connected. Like it just UFOs, UAPs, the occupants, people quite often recall psychic messaging and being connected to the phenomenon in a non-local way. And that's very similar to just remote viewing, mediumship, all this other stuff that has been happening in the psychic world for decades. So, yeah, it was just a fun side of the story to explore.
Have you tried the psionics yourself or seen any of it happen in person yourself?
No, I haven't tried CE5s or anything like that, or the psionics like thing. I can try right now. Do you want me to try?
Sure, and I know you're kind of in you look like LeVar Burton now from Star Trek. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Captain, the dilithium crystals are phasing down and the warp engines are not coming back online. Sorry, what was your question?
Well, what was it of that movie, your research into that movie kind of made you a believer? Because obviously to put out a movie like that, you at least gotta have some believability into the remote viewing. You do present a lot of evidence that this is actually a thing somehow, as unbelievable as it seems.
Yeah, I think just looking at the history of it, and so I interviewed Tracy Garbett Dolan first, and she introduced me to Russ Targ, and I got a lengthy interview from him in his home out in Palo Alto. And then I went from there and started getting all these other people in the film. And, you know, Russ gave me the crash course on the Stargate project and all this research that was being done with RSI, SRI, sorry, I'm tired, Stanford Research Institute, and then the CIA and the DIA and all that stuff. What I found interesting is like just the human side of things, how Russ got involved in all this because as a young boy, he had read the research by J.B. Ryan, who set up the Ryan Institute, and at Duke University had started psychic testing with the Zener cards and all that stuff. Zener cards are featured at the starting of the movie Ghostbusters, where Peter Venkman is electrocuting the male student, but the hot blonde who he's trying to sleep with, who's definitely not psychic, he's been rewarding, right? Whereas in the male student, hits every prediction from the Zener card. And there's 5 cards to a 25 card deck. Each card has 5 copies. It's a square, a triangle, wavy lines, circle, and I think a cross or a star. A star, I think a star. So that psychic stuff has been going on in the West for a long time. And that inspired a young 13-year-old Russ Targ. Eventually, he worked for NASA. And when he was asking them for funding to do psychic research seriously in his own way, which led to remote viewing, it was Apollo astronaut Edgar Mitchell that actually came in and heard him talking to the manager there at NASA and said, look, I'm going to be going to SRI. Come with me. And I can, oh, it was Dr. Venkman. Yeah. So, just like parts of the history that I had not known about. And this guy, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, was so prolific in the UFO community, but also a pioneer in consciousness and the psychic community with the Noetics Institute that he founded. He was doing psychic research in space during the Apollo 14 mission. So, it seems great mind thinks alike. And the documentary just explores all these cases and the non-human intelligence sort of side of things.
Do you have any more confidence about what happens when we pass away with your exploration of consciousness for this movie?
Um, well, we didn't really cover that. Didn't you watch the doc?
I did, but I'm just wondering as far as the whole connection, and you're talking about like everyone's connected,
Yeah,
and
I know, I know.
so like what's floating around, like that's what I mean. I know you didn't cover it, but
I know. Well, I mean, I'm like an atheist. I don't even think the way I look at life is
so you're the worst person to be doing a documentary like this.
why, man. I'm looking for like the best facts and evidence to
Yeah.
prove stuff. I'm like scientific about, my approach is bring bring about information, provide the best information, rather than like just jump right to a conclusion and be completely lost in that conclusion that you've made. Um, if there's an afterlife, then amazing. But I feel like it's kind of a selfish human construct, just like everything we do. We create an idea that egregore grows and becomes a beast, and so we might just have one shot at life here on Earth, and we are the top of the food chain on this planet, and we can live a life of hell and treat people in that way, treat ourselves and our bodies in that way. And maybe that's what great teachers like Buddha, Muhammad, and Jesus were talking about. They're like, there's a better way to live while you're here, right? Live like this. Or we can live a life of heaven, and we can respect each other and love each other and look out for each other and do the right thing, When you close your eyes for the last time, it might be like that restful sleep that you get where you don't have a dream. You just close your eyes and it's dark blackness and there's nothing else. And those are some of the best sleeps you ever have. You wake up and you're like, oh, that was great. I didn't have a nightmare. Maybe I didn't have a wet dream, but I feel rested. And you rest in peace. Maybe that's what it's all about. In my opinion, that could be it. But a lot of people want more. And consciousness does not necessarily have to link to an afterlife, but maybe there is a psychic residue that we leave behind, which is good or bad. It's kind of like a psychic memory that's left in a house or left in an area if we pass away and we leave that there. But I don't know if you stick around and you haunt the place, I don't know. Maybe I should do a documentary on ghost hunting. I don't know.
Well, very interesting to hear your take on that, which I won't delve into too much because it's getting late, but maybe another time.
Yeah.
Just briefly, since you have done numerous documentaries about the moon, what do you think of people that say we haven't landed on the moon? And briefly, is there something mysterious on the other side of the moon that we should be watching out for and paying attention to this conspiracy?
I mean, for people that say we didn't land on the moon, I would say we didn't set up video calls and video conferencing, and we don't have microphones, but we're using them right now.
There we go. Someone says perhaps a documentary on near death experiences. Hillbilly Herb, I had one, and I can say that I sadly, as close to it I came as death, although I am a believer for surviving it, I did not have any near death experience, which kind of frightens me in a way. because it goes towards what Darcy was just talking about, that it might be over, but at the same time, I shouldn't have survived that. But I won't get into that. And also, you did a documentary on the Men in Black. Just quickly, do you think at one point sometimes these things are actual aliens, and in other times there's actually real men in black that probably existed more in the time period before cell phones and video cameras everywhere, that were more a branch of the government? Because it seems like there's two different types that we hear about.
Yeah. So for me, the real cases are men from different layers of security or intelligence, and they are dispatched to, confront certain witnesses, uh, depending on where they sit in hierarchy in our society. So you've got, John Callahan, for example. He witnessed the JAL Airlines incident that was leaving from, I can't remember where it was going from, but it was going to Anchorage, Alaska, or over Anchorage, Alaska. I think it was heading to Europe. But they witnessed this massive craft object, looks like a sun in the sky, and it emits two smaller craft that then probe the cabin, the flight cabin. The pilots are freaking out. They're like, it's a Japanese guy. He's like, oh my God. Like, they're doing big, massive evasive maneuvers in the middle of the sky at night, big circles to try and get away from this thing and things it's emitted. It's really well documented, the case. It's reported to the FAA. John Callahan works for the FAA. They're going over those files. And that week that it happened, the CIA comes into their office and says, John, grab all your files. They want to have a meeting with everybody that's been touched by this case. Come and bring your files. They said, bring your files. He kept a copy. That copy eventually got leaked to the Disclosure Project through Stephen Greer. Thank you, God. And, his testimony is very valid. But when they went to that meeting, the CIA confiscated all the documents that were brought by all the different personnel. And they threatened them and said, this didn't happen and don't ever speak of this again. That is a Men in Black encounter, in my opinion. Then you've got like Air Force OSI, Richard Doty, and all these other people that intercept different people, but they come from different levels of security. And I guess the CIA went to the FAA because the FAA wouldn't take anybody else seriously, right? The FBI sometimes is dispatched. The NSA, apparently, according to Mike Ricksecker, kind of fit the bill of sometimes being dispatched to certain things to control the narrative. The non-human intelligence cases are mostly speculation. We use two cases in the documentary, which I won't ruin. You can watch it on YouTube Movies for free. Just go to that premium side of the YouTube app, which is like mostly feature films, fiction, and documentaries, and search Who Saw the Men in Black. And I think, if one of those cases is real, it's incredible. And it would prove, like you were saying before, with Jim Semivan and others who have said it's them that want this disclosure effort to stop because they don't want everybody to know that they're here. And that seems to be the message with some of these Men in Black sightings that are non-human Men in Black.
Very interesting. Well, I'm going to check that movie out. I haven't seen that one. Your website is occultjourneys.com. All the information for your new movie is in the description of this video. And I appreciate all the information. I'll let you wrap this up here. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Hannibal TV. My friend, my amigo, now south of the border, no longer a Canadian, trying to become an American. He'll pile drive me for saying that, but it's okay. I deserve it. Thanks for having me on. Go to my socials, add me on Instagram, Darcy Weir Films, or add Occult Journeys on YouTube. You can watch some of my films and other stuff there. Add Occult Journeys on Twitter if you want to talk about politics, because that's what people do there. Facebook, just Darcy Weir. Thanks. Bye.